Welcome to Fairy World. The Girl Who Wove Tomorrow. In a small village at the edge of a great forest, there lived a girl named Ilara, who had the most unusual hair anyone had ever seen. It was long and silver, reaching down past her knees, and it shimmered in the sunlight like threads of moonlight. But what made her hair truly special was not how it looked, but what it could do. Ilara had discovered her gift quite by accident when she was 12 years old. She had been sitting by her window one afternoon, absently pulling a strand of her hair and twisting it between her fingers, when she noticed something strange. The strand began to glow softly, and as she twisted it, images appeared in her mind, images of things that had not yet happened. She saw her neighbor's cow giving birth to twin calves. She saw rain falling 3 days later. She saw her father catching a huge fish in the river. At first, Ilara thought she was simply daydreaming. But when all these things came to pass exactly as she had seen them, she realized that her hair held a special magic. It could show her the future, not just one future, but many possible futures, depending on how she wove the strands together. Ilara lived with her father in a small cottage near the village square. Her mother had died when she was very young, and her father worked as a carpenter, making furniture and tools for the villagers. He was a kind man with rough hands and a gentle smile, and he loved his daughter more than anything in the world. When Ilara told him about her gift, he listened carefully and believed her right away. "This is a powerful thing you have discovered," he said, stroking his beard thoughtfully. "You must be careful with it. The future is not meant to be seen by everyone." Ilara agreed. Together, they decided that she would keep her gift secret from most people, but she would use it to help when she could. She began to weave small tapestries from her hair, each one showing a different possible future. She would sit at her loom for hours, carefully pulling strands of her silver hair and weaving them together with regular thread to make the images stronger and clearer. The first tapestry she made showed the village's harvest. In it, she saw the wheat fields golden and full, the apple trees heavy with fruit. She showed this tapestry to the village elder, old Marcus, who was one of the few people who knew about her gift. He was relieved to see that the harvest would be good, and he made sure the villagers prepared enough storage for all the crops. The second tapestry showed a storm coming from the east. Ilara wove it quickly and warned the fishermen not to go out to sea that day. They listened, and when the storm arrived that evening, with fierce winds and lightning, all the boats were safely on shore, and all the fishermen were home with their families. Word began to spread. Though Ilara and her father tried to keep things quiet, people whispered about the girl with silver hair who could see what was coming. Some were grateful, others were afraid, and a few were curious in ways that made Ilara uncomfortable. As Ilara grew older, her gift grew stronger. By the time she was 17, she could weave tapestries that showed futures months or even years ahead. She could see who would fall in love, who would fall ill, where new houses would be built, and when the seasons would change. Her room became filled with tapestries, each one hanging on the walls or rolled up carefully in the corner. Each one showed a different thread of time, a different path the world might take. But Ilara had rules for herself. She would never weave a tapestry to see her own future. She believed that some things should remain unknown, especially about oneself, and she would never weave a tapestry just out of curiosity. She would only use her gift when she felt it was important, when she felt that knowing the future might help prevent suffering or bring joy to others. One autumn evening, as the leaves were turning gold and red, Ilara sat at her loom feeling restless. There had been a strange tension in the air all day, a feeling she could not quite name. It was like the stillness before a storm, but deeper somehow, more ancient. She tried to ignore it, but the feeling only grew stronger as the sun set and darkness crept across the sky. Finally, she gave in to the urge. She pulled a long strand of her silver hair and began to weave. She did not have a specific question in mind, which was unusual for her. Normally, she would focus on a particular person or event or place, but tonight she simply wove, letting her hands move on their own, letting the magic guide her. The tapestry grew quickly under her fingers. It was larger than any she had made before, and the images that appeared in it were more vivid, more real. She wove for hours, through the night and into the early morning, not stopping even when her fingers ached and her eyes burned with tiredness. She felt compelled to finish it, as if something was pushing her forward, as if the tapestry itself wanted to be born. When the first light of dawn came through her window, Ilara finally stopped. She stepped back from her loom and looked at what she had created. The tapestry was beautiful and terrible at the same time. It showed her village, but not as it was now. In the tapestry, the village was empty. The houses stood silent with their doors hanging open. The fields were overgrown with weeds. The river ran dark and strange, and in the center of the village square there was a great crack in the earth, as if the ground itself had split open. From this crack came a cold blue light that seemed to freeze everything around it. Ilara felt her heart grow cold. This was not just a possible future. This was a warning. Something terrible was going to happen to her village, to her home, to everyone she loved. She looked closer at the tapestry, searching for clues about when this would happen and why. As she examined it more carefully, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. There, in the corner of the tapestry, woven in the smallest and most delicate strands of her silver hair, was an image of herself. She was standing in her room, weaving at her loom, and what she was weaving in the image was this very tapestry, the one she had just finished. Ilara stepped back in shock. She had woven herself weaving this future, which meant that by creating this tapestry, she had somehow made this future more real. She had not just seen a catastrophe. She had, in some way she did not fully understand, stitched it into being. She ran to find her father. He was already awake, preparing to go to his workshop. When he saw the look on Ilara's face, he immediately put down his tools and listened as she explained what had happened. "Show me," he said quietly. They went to her room together, and her father stood before the tapestry for a long time, saying nothing. Finally, he spoke. "You have woven many futures, Ilara, but you have never unwoven one. Perhaps that is what you must do now." Ilara had thought of this already. In all her years of weaving, she had never undone a tapestry. She had always believed that once a future was woven, it was set, that unweaving it would do nothing to change what was coming. But now she had no choice. She had to try. But as she reached for the tapestry, ready to begin pulling it apart, she felt something strange. a resistance, as if the tapestry itself did not want to be destroyed. And then she heard a voice, soft and ancient, seeming to come from the threads themselves. "Not this one," the voice whispered. "To undo this future, you must undo another. Choose carefully, weaver, for you may choose only once." Ilara pulled her hand back, startled. Her father had heard it too. They looked at each other in confusion and fear. "What does it mean?" Ilara asked. "I must unweave a different tapestry? But which one, and why?" Her father shook his head. "I do not know, but if the magic itself is speaking to you, then you must listen. Perhaps the tapestries are more connected than we thought. Perhaps changing one future changes others." Ilara spent the rest of that day looking at all the tapestries she had ever woven. There were dozens of them, covering every wall of her room and filling the chest at the foot of her bed. Each one showed a different future. Some were small and simple, showing a single person or a single day. Others were complex and large, showing months or years of time, showing the whole village and all the people in it. She tried to understand how they might be connected to the catastrophe she had woven. She looked for patterns, for threads that appeared in more than one tapestry, for clues about which one she should unweave. But the more she looked, the more confused she became. Every future seemed separate from the others. Every tapestry seemed to stand alone. As evening came, Ilara felt despair creeping over her. How could she possibly choose which tapestry to unweave? And what would happen when she did? Would it truly prevent the catastrophe, or would it make things worse? Would unweaving one future destroy the timeline entirely, or would it simply shift things in ways she could not predict? She went to the village elder, old Marcus, and told him everything. He listened gravely, his wrinkled face serious in the firelight. "This is beyond my wisdom," he admitted, "but I know someone who might be able to help. There is a woman who lives deep in the forest, far from any village. She is called the Memory Keeper. It is said that she knows the secrets of time itself, that she remembers futures that never happened and pasts that have been forgotten. If anyone can guide you, it would be her." "How do I find her?" Ilara asked. "Follow the river upstream for a day and a night. When you reach the place where the water splits around a great gray stone, take the left path. Continue until the trees grow so thick that almost no light reaches the ground. There you will find her cottage." Ilara set out the next morning. She brought food and water and a warm cloak, for the autumn air was growing cold. She also brought 3 of her tapestries. The first was the catastrophe tapestry, the one that had started all of this. The second was one of the oldest tapestries she had ever woven, made when she was just learning her gift. It showed a simple future, a summer day with children playing by the river. The third was one she had woven just a month ago, showing the village in winter, with snow on the roofs and smoke rising from chimneys, and people going about their lives in peace and contentment. The journey through the forest was long and quiet. Ilara followed the river as Marcus had instructed, walking steadily as the sun moved across the sky. She saw deer drinking from the water and birds singing in the trees. She passed places where wildflowers still bloomed despite the late season, their colors bright against the brown and gold of autumn. As night fell, she made a small camp by the riverbank. She built a fire and ate some bread and cheese, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. She thought about her gift and about the responsibility it carried. She had always tried to use it wisely, to help others and to prevent harm. But now she had made a terrible mistake. In her curiosity, in her restlessness, she had woven a future that should never have been seen. And in seeing it, in giving it form and shape through her weaving, she had made it real. Or had she? Perhaps the catastrophe was going to happen anyway, and her weaving had simply revealed it. Perhaps she was meant to see it so that she could prevent it. But then why did the voice say she had to unweave a different tapestry? What did it all mean? These thoughts circled in her mind as she lay down to sleep, wrapped in her cloak with the fire crackling nearby. She dreamed of threads and futures, of tapestries that wove themselves, of time flowing like water through her fingers. She woke at dawn and continued her journey. By mid-morning she reached the place where the river split around a great gray stone, just as Marcus had described. She took the left path, leaving the sound of the water behind. The forest grew darker and denser as she walked. The trees here were ancient, their trunks thick and gnarled, their branches twisted together overhead to form a canopy that blocked out most of the sunlight. Ilara felt a strange sensation as she walked deeper into this part of the forest. It was as if time itself was different here, slower and heavier. She could not tell how long she had been walking. It might have been hours or minutes. The path seemed to stretch and shrink, and sometimes she felt as if she was walking in place, making no progress at all. But finally, when the forest was so dark that it felt like twilight, even though she knew it must still be day, she saw a cottage ahead. It was small and simple, made of gray stone and dark wood, with moss growing on its roof and ivy climbing its walls. Smoke rose from its chimney, and warm light glowed in its windows. Ilara approached and knocked on the door. For a long moment there was no answer. Then the door opened, and a woman stood before her. The memory keeper was neither young nor old. Her age seemed to shift and change as Ilara looked at her, as if she existed in multiple times at once. Her hair was long and white, but her face was smooth. Her eyes were dark and deep, holding in them the weight of countless years and countless stories. "You are the weaver," the memory keeper said. It was not a question. "I have been expecting you. Come inside." The cottage was larger inside than it appeared from outside, its walls lined with shelves holding hundreds of objects. There were bottles filled with colored sand, boxes made of carved bone, mirrors that reflected no image, and books bound in leather that looked older than the forest itself. In the center of the room was a large wooden table, and beside it a loom much like Ilara's own. "Sit," the memory keeper said, gesturing to a chair, "and show me what you have brought." Ilara sat and carefully unrolled the 3 tapestries she had carried. The memory keeper examined each one closely, running her fingers over the woven threads, holding them up to the light, even smelling them, which struck Ilara as odd. "You have great talent," the memory keeper said finally. "Your weaving is some of the finest I have seen. The magic flows through your work clearly and strongly. But you have made a mistake, as I am sure you know." "Yes," Ilara said quietly. "I wove without purpose, without focus, and I created something terrible." "No," the memory keeper said, and her voice was gentle but firm. "That is not your mistake. The catastrophe you wove was already coming. You did not create it. You simply gave it form. Your mistake was in believing that seeing the future makes you responsible for it. Elara frowned, not understanding. But the voice said I must unweave a tapestry to prevent it. If I am not responsible, why must I choose? The memory keeper smiled. Because you are connected to it now. By weaving the catastrophe, you have woven yourself into its pattern. You are part of that future, which means you have the power to change it. But the change cannot come from destroying what you have already created. It must come from altering something that led to it. She gestured to the tapestries spread on the table. Every future is connected to every other future. They branch and merge like rivers. A decision made in one timeline affects countless others. Somewhere among all the tapestries you have woven is one that contains the seed of this catastrophe. If you unweave that one, you will change the path that leads to the empty village and the crack in the earth. But which one? Elara asked, feeling overwhelmed. I have woven so many. How can I possibly know which one to choose? That, the memory keeper said, is the question you must answer. And to answer it, you must understand something about your gift that you have not yet realized. She stood and went to her own loom. On it was a half-finished tapestry, woven not from hair, but from threads of many colors, threads that seemed to shimmer and shift as Elara watched. When you weave a future, the memory keeper said, you are not just observing what might be. You're making a choice about what to pay attention to. Every person, every moment, contains infinite possibilities. By choosing to weave one particular future, you're saying that this possibility matters, that it is worth seeing and worth preserving. And in doing so, you give it more weight, more reality, than the futures you do not weave. She turned to look at Elara. So the question is not which tapestry contains the seed of the catastrophe. The question is which future you have given too much weight to, which possibility you have made too real by paying it too much attention. Elara thought about this. She thought about all the tapestries she had woven over the years. Most of them had been practical, showing harvests and weather and the simple events of village life. But some had been different. Some had shown deeper things, more important things. May I see the rest of your tapestries? The memory keeper asked. All of them? Elara shook her head. I could not bring them all. There are too many, and I came alone. Then you must return home and examine them all, the memory keeper said. Look at each one carefully, not just at what it shows, but at why you wove it. What were you feeling when you created it? What did you hope to see or to prevent? The answer is there in your own intentions. But how will I know when I find the right one? Elara asked. The memory keeper smiled again. You will know. The magic will tell you, just as it told you that you could. Only choose once. Trust your gift, weaver. Trust yourself. Elara stayed at the cottage that night. The memory keeper fed her soup made from mushrooms and herbs, and they talked long into the evening about the nature of time and fate and choice. The memory keeper told stories of other seers and weavers she had known, people who could glimpse the future through different means. Some had gone mad from what they saw. Others had become so afraid of changing the future that they had done nothing at all, even when they might have helped. The future is not fixed, the memory keeper said, as they sat by the fire. But neither is it completely fluid. Think of it like a river. The water flows in a certain direction, following the shape of the land. But within that flow, there are eddies and currents, places where the water swirls and circles, places where it might go in different directions. Your gift lets you see these places, these moments of choice, and sometimes, by seeing them, you can influence which way the water flows. Is that what I did with the catastrophe? Elara asked. Did I make the water flow toward it by weaving it? Perhaps, the memory keeper said, or perhaps you simply saw where it was already flowing. That is the mystery of your gift. You cannot know for certain whether you are seeing or creating, but you can choose what to focus on. You can choose which futures to strengthen and which to let fade. In the morning, Elara thanked the memory keeper and began her journey home. She traveled quickly, eager to examine her tapestries with this new understanding. The forest seemed less dark and confusing on the return journey, as if the path knew she had found what she was looking for. She reached her village by evening of the second day. Her father was relieved to see her, and she told him everything the memory keeper had said. Together, they went to her room and began to look at her tapestries with new eyes. Elara spread them out, covering every surface in the room. She looked at each one, trying to remember not just what it showed, but why she had woven it. Many of them brought back clear memories. The harvest tapestry had been woven because Marcus had asked her to check if the crops would be good. The storm tapestry had been woven because she had felt a disturbance in the air and wanted to keep the fishermen safe. The winter tapestry had been woven because she wanted to see her village at peace, to reassure herself that despite all the small troubles and worries of daily life, the community would endure. But as she looked through them all, one tapestry caught her attention. It was one she had woven about 2 years ago, during a difficult time. That summer, there had been a conflict in the village between two families over land boundaries. The argument had grown heated, with harsh words and threats. Everyone in the village had been affected by the tension. Friends had taken sides. The community had felt divided and angry. Elara had been upset by this conflict. She had woven a tapestry to see how it would end. In the tapestry, she had seen one of the families leaving the village entirely, packing up their belongings and moving away. The other family would remain victorious but isolated, for many people had been angry about how they had handled the dispute. When Elara had shown this tapestry to Marcus, he had been disturbed by it. He had worked hard to mediate between the families, to find a compromise that would let both of them stay and live in peace. And he had succeeded. The two families had eventually reached an agreement. The one that Elara had seen leaving had stayed instead. But now, as Elara looked at this tapestry again, she felt a strange pull from it. She remembered how she had felt when she wove it. She had been angry herself, frustrated with the stubbornness and pride that had caused the conflict. And if she was honest with herself, she had wanted to see one family punished for their behavior. She had woven this future not just to observe, but to judge, to show that their actions had consequences. She had been wrong to do that. She saw that now. She had let her own feelings influence the weaving. She had given weight and reality to a future born from anger rather than wisdom. This one, she said quietly, holding up the tapestry. Her father looked at it. The conflict between the Thorn family and the Reed family? But that was resolved. They both stayed. That future did not come to pass. Not completely, Elara said, but I think some part of it did. The Thorn family stayed, but they were never the same afterward. They became withdrawn, less involved in village life. Their children stopped playing with other children. They kept to themselves. Her father nodded slowly. That is true. I had not thought about it much, but yes, they have been different since then. Elara held the tapestry close to the light. As she examined it more carefully, she saw something she had missed before. In the background of the image, far behind the family that was leaving, there was the faintest sketch of the village square, and in that sketch, almost invisible, was the beginning of a crack in the ground. Just a tiny line, barely there, but definitely present. "This is it," she said with certainty. "This is where the catastrophe began. Not in the big things, but in the small ones. In division and anger and separation. By weaving this future of departure and isolation, I gave power to the forces that would eventually break the village apart entirely." "Are you sure?" her father asked. Elara closed her eyes and felt the magic of the tapestry. She felt the threads of her hair woven through it, still alive with possibility, still connected to the future they showed. And she felt the truth of it. This was the one. This was the tapestry she had to unweave, but she hesitated. If I unweave this, what will happen? Will the conflict return? Will the Thorn family leave after all? Her father put his hand on her shoulder. You cannot know what will happen. You can only trust that changing this will change what comes after. The memory keeper said to trust your gift. Trust yourself. Elara took a deep breath. She sat down at her loom and placed the tapestry before her. Unweaving was different from weaving. It required just as much care, just as much focus, but instead of creating, she would be releasing. Instead of giving form to possibility, she would be letting possibility return to formlessness. She began with the edges of the tapestry, carefully pulling apart the threads where they were woven together. As she worked, she felt the magic respond. The images in the tapestry began to fade, becoming less clear, less real. She worked slowly and carefully, unwinding each strand of her silver hair and separating it from the ordinary thread. As she unwove, she thought about the conflict between the families. She thought about how she should have approached it differently. She should have woven a tapestry showing reconciliation instead of separation. She should have used her gift to show the best possible future instead of the one born from anger. She realized something important as she worked. The memory keeper had been right. Her gift was not just about seeing the future, it was about choosing which future to give attention to, which possibility to make more real. By weaving the separation, she had made it more likely to happen. And even though it had not happened exactly as she had shown, the essence of it had come to pass. The division, the isolation, the crack in the community that would eventually become a crack in the earth itself. The unweaving took hours. The sun set and rose again. Her father brought her food and water, but she barely noticed. She was completely focused on her work, on carefully undoing what she had done. Each thread she pulled apart felt like a weight lifting. Each image that faded felt like a breath released. Finally, as morning light filled her room, she pulled apart the last threads. The tapestry was completely unwoven, reduced to a pile of loose threads, both silver and ordinary, lying on the table before her. She felt exhausted, but also lighter than she had in days. "It is done," she said quietly. Her father hugged her. "Rest now. You have done what needed to be done." But Elara could not rest yet. She needed to know if it had worked. She needed to see if the catastrophe had been prevented. She pulled fresh strands of her silver hair and began to weave again, this time with a clear purpose. She wove a tapestry showing the village in the time when the catastrophe was supposed to occur. As the image appeared in her weaving, she held her breath, and then she let it out in relief. The village in this new tapestry was alive and whole. The houses were full of people, the fields were green, the river ran clear and bright, and the village square had no crack in the ground, no cold blue light, only ordinary stones and ordinary sunlight, and people going about their ordinary lives. The catastrophe was gone. By unweaving the tapestry of anger and division, she had changed the path of the future. The seed that would have grown into destruction had been removed. Elara slept then, deeply and dreamlessly, for the first time in days. When she woke, it was afternoon, and her father was sitting by her bed with a worried but loving expression. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Tired," she said, "but better. It worked, Father. The village is safe." He smiled. "I knew you would find the answer. You have always been wise beyond your years." But Elara shook her head. "I was not wise at all. I let my feelings cloud my judgment. I used my gift wrongly." "You are human," her father said gently. "You made a mistake, and then you fixed it. That is all any of us can do." Over the following days and weeks, Elara noticed changes in the village. Small changes, subtle ones, but real. The Thorn family began to emerge from their isolation. Their children started playing with other children again. The father joined the other men at the tavern in the evenings. The mother began attending the market, chatting with the other women. It was as if a weight had been lifted from them, though they could not have known what had happened or why. Elara had changed the future that was pulling them toward isolation, and so they were free to choose a different path. Elara learned important lessons from this experience. She became even more careful with her gift. She thought deeply about each tapestry before she wove it. She examined her own intentions and feelings. She made sure she was weaving from a place of wisdom and compassion rather than anger or fear or curiosity. She also learned that she could not control everything. The future was vast and complex, full of choices and chances and moments that could go in countless directions. Her gift let her glimpse some of these moments, but it did not give her the power or the right to determine which path others should take. She could offer guidance, she could show possibilities, but in the end, people had to make their own choices. Marcus, the village elder, noticed the change in Elara. "You seem different," he said to her one day, "more at peace with yourself." "I learned that my gift is not just a tool," Elara explained. "It is a responsibility, and part of that responsibility is knowing when not to use it, knowing when to let the future unfold on its own." "That is wisdom," Marcus said approvingly. But Elara's trials were not over. A few months after she had unwoven the tapestry of division, a stranger came to the village. He was a tall man with dark eyes and expensive clothes, clearly someone of importance from a larger city far away. He asked to speak with Elara. "I have heard of your gift," the stranger said when they met. I have heard that you can weave the future from your hair. I have come to ask for your help. Ilara was cautious. What kind of help? I am an advisor to the king, the man explained. The king faces difficult decisions, choices that will affect the entire kingdom. He needs to know what the consequences of his actions will be. I want you to come to the capital and weave futures for him to guide his decisions. Ilara felt uncomfortable. I do not weave futures for individual gain or power, she said carefully. I use my gift to help my community, to prevent harm when I can. This is about more than individual gain, the stranger insisted. The king's decisions affect thousands of people. Imagine how much good you could do if you helped him choose wisely. Imagine how much suffering you could prevent. It was tempting. Ilara had to admit that. The chance to use her gift on a larger scale, to influence the course of the entire kingdom, was appealing. But she remembered what the memory keeper had said. Every future she wove, she gave weight and reality too. If she started weaving futures for a king, showing him paths to power and control, what unintended consequences might that have? I need time to think about this, Ilara said. The stranger agreed to stay in the village for a few days while she considered. Ilara talked with her father and with Marcus. She walked in the forest and sat by the river, trying to clear her mind and understand what the right choice would be. Finally, she decided to weave a tapestry to help her decide. But she did not weave a future showing what would happen if she went to the capital. Instead, she wove a tapestry showing what would happen if she stayed in the village and continued using her gift as she had been, carefully and locally. In this tapestry, she saw herself growing older in the village. She saw herself weaving tapestries for her neighbors, helping with small problems and small joys. She saw herself teaching others about her gift, eventually passing on her knowledge. And she saw the village thriving, not in grand or dramatic ways, but in the quiet, steady way of a community that takes care of its own. The tapestry showed no great events, no sweeping changes to the kingdom, but it showed something valuable nonetheless, a life lived with purpose and integrity, a gift used wisely and well. When Ilara saw this, she knew her answer. She went to the stranger and told him she would not come to the capital. My gift is not meant for kings and kingdoms, she said. It is meant for the people and places I know and love. I am sorry, but I cannot help you. The stranger was disappointed and tried to persuade her, even offering her gold and status. But Ilara stood firm. After he left, she felt certain she had made the right choice. She had learned that bigger was not always better, that influence was not the same as wisdom. Years passed. Ilara continued to live in her village, weaving her tapestries when needed, helping her community navigate the challenges and changes that came their way. She never forgot the catastrophe she had almost brought into being, and she never stopped being careful with her gift. She also never forgot the memory keeper. Every few years, she would make the journey back to the cottage in the deep forest, bringing news and questions. The memory keeper always welcomed her, and they would talk for hours about time and fate and the responsibility of those who could see what others could not. On one of these visits, when Ilara was in her 30s, the memory keeper gave her a gift. It was a small wooden box carved with intricate patterns. "What is this?" Ilara asked. "Open it," the memory keeper said. Inside the box was a strand of hair, but it was not silver like Ilara's. It was pure white, and it glowed with a soft light. "This is a strand of my own hair," the memory keeper explained. "I, too, have a gift, though different from yours. I can remember things that have been forgotten, futures that never happened, pasts that have been changed. I give you this strand so that if you ever need guidance, you can weave it into your tapestries. It will help you see more clearly, help you understand the connections between past and future." Elara was honored and a little overwhelmed. "Thank you," she said. "I will use it wisely." "I know you will," the memory keeper said. "You have learned what many with gifts like yours never learn. You have learned that seeing is not the same as knowing, and knowing is not the same as controlling. You have learned humility." As Elara grew older, her reputation grew despite her efforts to keep her gift quiet. People from neighboring villages began to seek her out, asking for her help with their problems. She was always careful about how she responded. She would not weave futures for everyone who asked. She would only do so when she felt it was truly necessary, when the future she might see could prevent real harm or bring genuine good. She also began to teach. A young girl in the village, a girl of about 12 with unusual copper-colored hair, began to show signs of having a similar gift. The girl's name was Iris, and she came to Elara nervous and confused about the strange visions she was having. Elara recognized in Iris what she herself had been years ago. She took the girl under her wing, teaching her about the responsibility that came with such gifts, about the importance of intention and wisdom, about the dangers of curiosity without purpose. "Your gift is not a game," Elara told Iris. "It is not entertainment. It is a tool that can help others, but only if you use it with great care. You must always ask yourself why you want to see a particular future. Is it to help someone? Is it to prevent harm? Or is it just because you want to know? That last reason is never good enough." Iris listened carefully and learned quickly. She had natural talent, though her gift was different from Elara's. While Elara wove tapestries from her hair, Iris saw futures in water, in the reflections and ripples of pools and streams. Together, they made a good team, each complementing the other's abilities. On Elara's 40th birthday, the village held a small celebration in her honor. They did not speak openly about her gift, for she still kept it as quiet as possible. But everyone knew, and everyone was grateful for the quiet ways she had helped them over the years. Marcus, now very old and nearing the end of his life, stood and spoke. "Elara has been a blessing to this village," he said, "not because she has prevented every bad thing from happening, for that is impossible, but because she has shown us that the future is not something to fear. It is something we create together through our choices and our care for one another." These words stayed with Elara. They reminded her that her gift, while special, was not what mattered most. What mattered was the community, the connections between people, the small daily acts of kindness and care that wove the future more surely than any magical tapestry. When Marcus died a few months later, Elara wove a special tapestry in his memory. It showed not a future, but the past, all the good things he had done for the village over his long life. She hung this tapestry in the village hall, and people would come to look at it and remember him. It was one of the most beautiful things she ever created. As Elara entered her middle years, she found herself thinking more about the nature of her gift. She wondered where it had come from. Her mother had died when she was too young to ask such questions, and her father did not know. Her mother had been a quiet woman, kind but not magical as far as anyone knew. Perhaps the gift had come from further back in her family line. Perhaps it had simply appeared in her, a strange mutation or a blessing from some unknown source. One night, she had a dream. In the dream, she was standing in a vast space filled with threads, millions upon millions of threads stretching in every direction, glowing with soft light. Each thread was a life, she realized, and each life was connected to countless others, weaving together to form a great tapestry of existence. And she understood in the dream that this was what she had been seeing all along when she wove her futures, not separate, isolated events, but parts of this great tapestry. Every future she wove was just a small piece of a much larger pattern, a pattern so vast and complex that no one could ever see all of it. When she woke from this dream, Ilara felt a deep sense of peace. She realized that she did not need to understand everything about her gift. She did not need to control or predict every future. She simply needed to do her small part, weaving what she could see, helping where she could help, and trusting that the larger pattern would take care of itself. This realization freed her in a way she had not expected. She became less anxious about her choices, less worried about making mistakes. She still used her gift carefully, but she no longer carried the burden of feeling that everything depended on her. She was part of something larger, something that would continue long after she was gone. As she entered her 50s, Ilara's hair began to change. The silver was fading, becoming more white than silver, and she found that her gift was changing too. The futures she wove were less clear than they had been, less vivid. At first, this worried her. Was she losing her power? But then she realized that this too was natural. Just as her body was aging, so was her gift. And perhaps that was as it should be. Perhaps it was time to step back, to let the next generation take over. Iris was now a young woman confident in her own gift, ready to help the village in her own way. Ilara spent more time teaching Iris and less time weaving herself. She found that she enjoyed this role, sharing her knowledge and experience, helping Iris avoid the mistakes she herself had made. One day, Iris came to her with a question. What was the most important thing you ever did with your gift? Ilara thought about this carefully. She thought about all the tapestries she had woven, all the futures she had seen, all the people she had helped, and then she smiled. The most important thing I ever did, she said, was to unweave a tapestry, to undo a future I had created wrongly, because that taught me that we can change things. We are not trapped by the futures we see. We always have the power to choose a different path. Iris nodded thoughtfully. I will remember that. As Ilara grew older still, she wove less and less. Her hands were not as steady as they had been, and her eyes were not as sharp. But she found that she did not mind. She had done what she needed to do. She had used her gift well, had learned its lessons, had passed on its wisdom. She spent her later years in quiet contentment, living with her father until he passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 87. After that, she lived alone, but she was never lonely. The village took care of her as she had taken care of them. People brought her food and firewood. Children came to visit and listen to her stories. Iris came often to talk and to share what she was learning about her own gift. On Ilara's 70th birthday, she wove her last tapestry. It was small and simple, showing nothing but a single moment, a single scene. In it, she sat in her cottage with sunlight streaming through the window and a cup of tea in her hands. She was smiling. Around her were faint images of all the people she had known and loved, all the lives she had touched, all the futures she had helped to shape. It was not a vision of the future, it was simply an image of peace, of a life well lived, of satisfaction and gratitude. She hung this tapestry on her wall where she could see it every day, and it brought her joy. When Ilara died, a few years later, the village mourned her passing. They buried her in the cemetery on the hill overlooking the village, with a simple stone marking her grave. Iris kept all of Ilara's tapestries, storing them carefully and showing them to those who came seeking to understand the gift of foresight. But the most important tapestry, the one that Ilara had unwoven all those years ago, existed only in memory now. It had been reduced to threads, and then those threads had been used in other weavings, mixed with new futures, new possibilities. The catastrophe it had shown never came to pass. The village continued to thrive, generation after generation, held together by the same bonds of community and care that Ilara had worked so hard to preserve. And sometimes, on quiet nights, when the moon was full and the air was still, people would swear they could see a shimmer in the darkness above the village, like threads of silver catching the light. And they would remember the girl who wove tomorrow, who learned that the greatest gift was not seeing the future, but having the wisdom to know which futures to nurture and which to release. The end.